Governor Gavin Newsom always seems to be the person who, will bash President Trump, will bash anything Republicans are doing, but then we'll find a way to try to ease his way into the same conversation. Of course, we saw Mayor Bowser yesterday praising what's happening in Washington, D.C., and now we've sent Newsom now said, we're not going to allow President Trump to come in here and do that here, but we got some ideas of our own, and those ideas, I don't know, are almost identical, but just the California way.
That's right. So instead of working with the federal government to try and get resources for your state to try and fix the crime problem, Gavin Newsom is no longer shying away that there's a crime problem. Instead, now he's saying there's a crime emergency type situation. And so he's expanding a program to deploy state-funded crime suppression teams to major metropolitan areas. So state troopers, things of that nature, other state agencies to be able to put down the crime in these areas. Obviously, they see what's working in D.C. When you hear the mayor of D.C. yesterday, Jordan, saying that there's an 87% drop in the carjacking problem. I know cities like San Francisco, Los Angeles have a lot of those same problems. Instead of saying, hey, maybe we can work with the federal government, he's doing a copycat version, just like he did on social media, trying to emulate President Trump. Now he's trying to emulate the policies, but go it alone so as to boost his 2028 prospects.
President Trump an authoritarian and says this is a military move, and then right after that move starts getting praise from some Democrats like the mayor of D.C. that we talked about yesterday. He is now deploying his own state-funded crime suspension team to major metropolitan areas. So the governor himself deploying his own security forces to get violent crime and violent criminals off the streets in high crime areas in large cities such as, you could go through 20 in California, but San Diego, Los Angeles, Sacramento, and the Bay Area. So that would, of course, San Francisco and Oakland. And that these units are going to target repeat offenders, the illicit weapons, narcotics, all the same kind of things you're saying. It's getting crime and violent criminals off the street. But he's somehow saying it's different than militarizing American cities. And is it just because of what uniform those individuals are wearing? Because the National Guard and state guards, they perform a lot of duties. They can perform policing activity when necessary, only when necessary. And we believe this is a crisis. President Trump agrees with Gavin Newsom, obviously.
Of course, Rick, we had to call you up. I know you weren't scheduled to be on today, but, when the topic is Gavin Newsom, I figure who else could we hear from? Who should we always turn to get his thoughts and advice? And, of course, this comes now after Gavin Newsom unveiled his plan to stop criminal activity in California. And I think that's probably, a good thing in general. However, he's, pushes back on it and says, it's not really the same as President Trump's plan because, we're doing this within the state. But really, when you get down to the nitty gritty, it is what you would say, I guess, a copy and paste, a copy your homework kind of moment of, hey, just do it in my handwriting, so we don't get caught. And look, I guess good for President Trump, good for California, but this is typical Gavin Newsom playbook.
Yeah, look, Gavin Newsom has been the governor for 7 years. And he hasn't concentrated on stopping crime. Matter of fact, if you look at the one-party control in Sacramento, they've done some really horrible things with trying to make sure that the state allows the perpetrators of crime a safe haven. We call it sanctuary states or sanctuary cities. Yeah. We've had problems with homelessness. And this is a state that is radical left in its leadership. And the people are really outraged. One of the reasons why Gavin Newsom is responding is because President Trump tapped into the people after the Palisades fire. Cutting through the bureaucracy and doing common sense leadership was really popular in Los Angeles, the largest city in California. And so when President Trump talks about having the federal government come in, clean up the homeless encampments, clean up the crime, clean up the filth in our inner cities, this is extremely popular with people who didn't even vote for President Trump. And Gavin Newsom is feeling that. And so what is he doing? He's responding at the end of his term in a way to just pretend like he did something because he's actually running for president. And so he's responding on the law and order issue very late, too late, and only it's going to be halfway because he still has people in his party, lobbyists, and the media in California trained to think that it's not a problem of just law enforcement. He has literally made fun of cops, police officers. People don't want to be on the streets protecting us because they don't get supported by the politicians in California.
And as you said, Rick, embracing crime, it feels like. I know that sounds like a stretch, but I was in San Francisco a couple of years ago, and one of my favorite places on the planet, much less in this country, is the Bay Area in San Francisco. And I go there, and not the signs aren't the typical, hey, be careful what you leave in your car. It's take everything out of your car, roll your windows down. I mean, this is what in the Presidio, like in a nice area, roll your windows down because, look, we don't want to give the criminals the option of smashing in your window to steal whatever it is that may be in your bag. Make sure, or in your back of your car, make sure everything is cleared out. A lock isn't going to do it. They will do it, and we're not going to, it pretty much said, and we're not going to do anything about it if they do.
Yeah, and look, remember that Gavin Newsom and his team messaged for a very long time, very loudly, that if you didn't, when you were committing a crime, robbing a store, burglary, if it wasn't a value over $1,000, that the police weren't going to get involved. And that was something that these left-wing politicians thought, let's concentrate on the bigger crime and let's let petty theft just go. Well, the problem is that everyone started walking into stores, brick and mortar stores, grabbing $900 and walking out knowing they wouldn't be prosecuted. It became chaos. It still is. You see the homelessness everywhere, where they're, literally doing things on the street corner or under the overpass that are illegal. Having fires, for instance, to cook, having reckless, products out that cars are running over and hitting when there's wind that throws it into the streets. It's really chaos. And Gavin and his team, his team of left-wing leaders, they just haven't cared until President Trump pressured them. And so now they're going to try to do something. Let's see. So I think it's a little too late and it won't be enough. But let's see what happens. We've got the Olympics coming up, and a lot of people are concerned that Los Angeles may not be able to handle the Olympics.
Well, and Rick, we know, as you've mentioned, the policies of Gavin Newsom for years now have made it easier to get away with crime and thus making criminals more rampant within the state. He wouldn't listen to the people. He wouldn't listen to the companies that started saying, we're pulling out of these cities. We're not going to open new stores here anymore, or we're shutting down the ones we have because we can't survive. We're losing too much inventory to crime, to petty theft. But all of a sudden you see headlines like just this week from Politico saying Trump is leaning in on crime. Democrats need a better response and fast. You have the mayor of D.C. yesterday basically saying, look, this federal partnership is working, and we are grateful that we have this surge of law enforcement to be able to drop these crime rates. It seems like while Gavin Newsom won't listen to his constituents, we know what the big prize he has his eye on coming up in just a few years. Is the only thing he'll listen to are pollsters and political strategists?
Yeah, look, I think that's exactly right. He's listening to these people around him that are California-based, telling him that he's just got to be more left, more liberal to be able to win the primary. But I actually believe that someone like Gavin Newsom winning the primary is a disaster for the Democrats in the general, because he doesn't work in Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, the swing states. He just doesn't work. He's robotic. He's extremely far left. And he's also somebody who sends the message when you talk to him that he reinvents himself every couple of months. It's what we say, politicians that just stick their finger up, measure the wind, and go with the wind, go with the public polling. He is not a a strong person in having convictions of common sense policy. His convictions are chasing polls and trying to reinvent himself to be the next big thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we could see that when he launched his podcast and all of a sudden he's having Charlie Kirk on and being like, my son loves you. Charlie, is he here? No, he's not
he had
here.
to go to school.
Yeah.
You have to be in person to get an education.
Yeah, but that's always the case. It feels like with Newsom. Always trying. It was like the DeSantis debate. Completely unnecessary. No one's really sure why it even happened to begin with, but it gave him more airtime on Fox News. Of course, he thinks he can win over that crowd. I think you're right. As of right now, of course, he could reinvent himself once again, but right now he feels like a Harvey Dent. It doesn't feel like he has that appeal to everyone. But again, I wanted to hear from you, Rick, just because I think when things happen in California, and it feels like it happens more and more, and you're right that it does feel like this is because he was planning his run for president. Of course, look, you can't deter what goes on in California, what goes on in New York, and what goes on in a lot of our major cities, because though they may not affect the swing states, the policies, because of the size of the economies, do affect how really the world works. I mean, when you have California being one of the largest economies in the world, of course, if something happens in California, it's going to have ripple effects throughout the country. That's why I know, have been such an adamant supporter of fixing California, not abandoning what's going on there, because again, as you said, we only got 2 minutes left. This is, when a crisis happens there, we got to make sure, as the American people, we're paying attention.
Yeah, the fact is, though, Logan, that what we do know is that if Gavin Newsom was not running for president, he would be just doing what he has always done for the last 7 years, which is a selfish inward look, and he would just fade into oblivion because he really thinks that he's been successful these last 7 years. I was just this week in Sacramento. It's an atrocious homeless-driven downtown area. Its windows are broken. There are homeless people everywhere. It's very unsafe, and he doesn't care. This is his literally 3-4 block area that his policies clearly haven't worked, and he doesn't care about it because he's on to the next thing, which is focused on Washington.
All right, Rick. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I couldn't agree more.